Hello and welcome to the Yogi Bear's 7 Steps to Becoming More Mental Health Aware. So step 1 is all about how we can tune into any behavioural changes that we might see. Now, behaviour is a great indicator of what's happening for a person, or indeed what's happening for yourself. The thing about behaviour is it's what happens on the surface, it's what we see of people, and therefore it can sometimes be the best indicator if something is perhaps not quite right. I think the biggest thing for me when it comes to behaviour is how we respond to it. Very often when we encounter behaviour that we perhaps don't understand, or behaviour that is uncharacteristic for a person, we can go to a space of judgment, particularly if that behaviour is something that we deem to be unacceptable, or perhaps irrational, or just we don't understand it ultimately. And here's the thing, it's perfectly natural for us to go to that space of judgment, but sometimes it's not always the best place to go. Any changes in behaviour that we see in an individual can really give us some clues, and it might not always give us clues as to what's actually bothering that particular person or what that person is struggling with. But what it can tell us is that person is bothered by something and they're struggling with something. We might not know what it is, the behaviour might not allude to it, but we know that the behaviour is uncharacteristic, and therefore it is almost that first warning that something might not be quite right here. I think if you've ever encountered somebody who is behaving uncharacteristically, think back to how you might have responded to that. Maybe you might have responded in an emotional way towards it. Maybe somebody has reacted quite aggressively or with anger, and you may well have reacted that way back. You may well have questioned that person or challenged that person directly, because actually the behaviour that you're seeing isn't what was expected, or is in your eyes deemed as unacceptable. Here's the thing, suspending that judgment just for a minute can be one of the most powerful things that we can do in that situation. If we see behaviour that is uncharacteristic, or is not what we would expect from a particular person, it's almost about putting a pin in our judgment just for a moment and going, whoa, that was uncharacteristic, that's not what I was expecting. I wonder if there's something else going on here. It's a skill, because we are primed to react, and we're primed to react in a certain way, particularly if we're under threat. And if someone does behave uncharacteristically negative, so perhaps if they display anger, or they display hurt, or they display frustration or sadness, actually our brains are primed to go to almost a fight or flight response, an emergency response. And that can sometimes mean that our lateral thinking, our logical thinking is shut off momentarily. So it is almost about training ourselves to get into the habit of spotting those even sometimes minute changes in behaviour in somebody else, putting a pin in how we might normally react in those situations, and remembering first and foremost that something isn't quite right here, that seems a little bit off. And then perhaps there's another approach in terms of dealing with that. It is something that takes time, and it is something that takes patience to be able to attune our own behavioural responses, but it is something that's worth having a look at in terms of how we react and respond to behaviour. I've dealt with many people in the past who, perhaps have behaved uncharacteristically aggressive towards me, or in an angry way, or in an overtly sad way. Perhaps there's been tears and emotion, and it does straight away, the kind of response that we have in our minds is, oh, I've got to comfort that person, or hang on a minute, that's out of order, or you shouldn't speak to me like that, or whatever the response might be. And it is about training yourself to almost put the brakes on, put a pin in it, take a step back and go, that was out of character. But I guess the step, if you like, that first step is about really tuning into behavioural changes. And I would urge you to consider this for yourself as well. So if you are seeing yourself perhaps behave out of character, or if you are seeing yourself respond to things in a way that you wouldn't normally, What that can sometimes bring with it, particularly if there are some challenges around depression or anxiety, is that can bring guilt. You lash out at somebody. What can happen after that is you can feel guilty about that, you can feel bad about that, and actually that doesn't help sometimes how you're feeling. So if you are a person that is noticing uncharacteristic behaviour in yourself, again, it's about just putting a pin in that for a moment and going, whoa, what happened there? That wasn't like me. Maybe there's something else I need to have a think about here. Sometimes it is about remembering that that behaviour is what's happening on the surface. It's almost like the iceberg. Actually, what you see poking out of the water is the behaviour. Actually, what's happening underneath is so much bigger than just what we see or just what you experience in your own behaviour. There's all kinds of thoughts, feelings, values, experiences, so much going on beneath the surface of that behaviour. And all of that is what drives that behaviour sometimes. So if a person is behaving in an uncharacteristic way, or if you find yourself behaving in an uncharacteristic way, it is absolutely worth asking the question, what is going on? But the biggest thing that you can do is to suspend your judgment when you see those behavioural changes. And actually, when it comes to mental health awareness, those behavioural changes, as difficult as they might be at times, are actually sometimes our only indicator that something may be going wrong. And we've almost got to learn to appreciate those changes in behaviour that we see, even when they might be difficult for us to deal with. Any parents that have dealt with children that are perhaps struggling with anything will know that some of those behavioural changes are really difficult to deal with. But actually, without them, we might not know that something is wrong. We might not know that something's going on. And it's not just about aggression or anger or that kind of extroverted displays of emotions. Actually, are we seeing someone being more withdrawn than they would normally be? Are we seeing someone retreat? And I think that is also something that we can tune into, particularly if it's coming from a person that wouldn't normally be withdrawn or retreat. And again, same thing for yourself. Are you seeing yourself behave in these ways? Are you seeing yourself pulling away from people or withdrawing or avoiding certain topics of conversation and situations that you find yourself in where you wouldn't normally? And again, it's about suspending the self-judgment there. Just like we're asking other people to suspend the judgment, we're asking you to suspend judgment on yourself just for a moment and acknowledge and notice that there has been some kind of a shift and that could be an indicator that something more is going on here. So there it is. First step of our 7 steps to becoming more mental health aware. Tune into those behavioural changes. Tune into them with others. Tune into them in yourself. Suspend your judgment and know that any of those behavioural changes that you are seeing could be an indicator that something else is going on. It could be an indicator that something is quite wrong. We're not going to look at what we do next because we'll look at that in future steps over the next couple of days. But for now, just keep in mind that one first small step that you can make. Tune into those behavioural changes in others. Tune into them in yourself. See them as an alert, even a tiny alert that something more might be going on. Suspend your judgment and go in with the what's happening here, what's going on, and potentially what can I do. So that's your first step. I'm looking forward to seeing you tomorrow when we'll be having a look at our next step and then every day for the rest of the week. Happy Mental Health Awareness Week. Enjoy, support each other, support yourselves, and have a great week.